First off, thank you for being here.
It is awesome to be here, Jordan.
I've been a big fan of yours and admirer of yours for a long time. So when Dallas, he actually told me, I think when we were shooting the scene between Little James and Jesus, before, when I was going through hair and makeup, he mentioned that he had talked to you about it, and that alone was really exciting. And then seeing your conversation with Dallas was really cool as well. So
it was a very moving scene.
Well,
he said,
thanks.
"What did you think?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I was moved. And it was amazing also be interviewed by Dallas. But thank you for having me on your show, and hello to everyone out there.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Yeah.
I want to talk about that scene and about the the relationship between faith and healing. Obviously, is something that I know you've talked a lot about. It's something I've become really passionate about talking about. But I usually start from the beginning. So your childhood, like what was childhood like for you? And one thing that you mentioned in that interview with Dallas that I find fascinating, and I've talked to a lot of other people within the disabled community about it. But the moment that you realize, or that you started to view your differences as like a flaw or as a weakness, because of how others were treating you. I remember specifically that moment for me, and I'll share that with you as well. But I'd love to talk about your childhood, and then what was that moment where it shifted and you started to kind of think negatively about your differences?
Dude, can I say I applaud you for doing a show like this. This is amazing. Yeah, look, such an honor just to share my story with your listeners a little bit. Born without limbs. If you're listening on audio, you can't see that I have no arms and legs, but I have on the bottom left of my torso a little foot, a little appendage with 2 toes. And my childhood, first and foremost, so thankful that I had a loving home. My mom and dad. It took my dad quicker, if you will, to embrace the circumstance.
Yeah.
But my mom, obviously she just had to go through a little bit more emotions and a different point of view as the mother, grieving and shock and questioning, especially the fact that she had a lot of medical background as well.
Yeah.
With no medical explanation, and even my brother and sister born after me with no disabilities whatsoever.
Did your mother have any guilt? Because I feel like there's mom guilt is a real thing, especially her growing you. I feel like psychologically sometimes you can wonder, like, is this my fault somehow?
Yeah, well, let's deep dive into that then a little bit first. So, she actually was a midwife, and she was the head of like 300 births in a hospital per month, and so she knew what thalidomide was. She actually didn't even take caffeine, no painkillers for headache or anything like that. She was extremely careful with her pregnancy, and she'd been seeing all her career these drug addicted women having perfectly beautiful babies, right? So that was part of her grieving process. Like, these women who didn't look after their pregnancy, here I am looking after my pregnancy with all that I am.
Mm-hmm.
And now I have a limbless child. And what was interesting, Jordan, was they had 3 sonograms and they had no idea that I had no limbs until I was actually born.
Wow.
And so it was a huge shock. And they were just too excited, right? But my mom told my dad there's something wrong. He's not moving as much. He's small. Something's wrong. Even when they actually wanted to know if I'm a male or female baby, they said the legs were not in the way. He's a boy for sure.
Yeah.
And so it was a huge shock. The grief, the questions. She first needed to know what happened, and no one knew what happened. And so she then figured out she couldn't blame the doctors, but there was nothing that she did wrong either.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's this grieving process of, first of all, mourning the dream of a healthy baby. Now, she had a healthy baby, but with a few bits missing.
Yeah.
And in their faith in God, I mean, my dad was 27 when he planted their first church. 11 months later, I was born. So new pastor, church plant, now the pastor's son being born without limbs. I mean, you can imagine. So went through a lot of that shame, guilt, like all that stuff. But yeah, we all go through those things.
Yeah.
So they embraced me, took me home. They had an incredible family support network around them, even to the point where both of my parents' said, if you give him up for adoption, we'll take him.
Wow.
But they knew that, no one's going to love their son as much as, they love them. They love me. And they were not thinking of adopting. And that was the way that they thought. We're just going to do our best and trust God in the rest. Now, we love seeing adoption happen. My friends actually have adopted special needs children that inspired me. Me and my wife are actually starting the paperwork to adopt children and
Wow.
sorry, a child. A children.
All the children.
We have enough, we have 4 biological children, but when you look at these kids who have disabilities, I know it, it's different when you have a disability. So many things you and I could talk about. The dynamic of, I don't even know if you had siblings, but
yeah,
the dynamic of them feeling like they're in our shadow. Mom and dad had to focus in on me more. And what does that mean?
We were a
The
little more high
dynamic,
maintenance,
right?
yeah.
And then me treating my brother like a slave. You know what I mean? Like feeling like I was entitled to him, then having to do things for me. And even my parents calling my brother Aaron to hold Moses' hands up. You know what I mean?
Wow,
Very interesting. So many things we could get into, but my parents embraced me and they always said, God has a plan for you. Don't worry about what people think of you. In 1982, that's when I was born. 1989, I was supposed to go to school. 1989, the state law in education in Australia disallowed me from being integrated into the mainstream school system. I was supposed to be segregated. But little did anyone know that my mom would be used in the hands of God to then actually go in full respect and full humility, but mama bear courage, go there and say, can we change the law? And they did. And so I was actually the first student that was handicapped, basically, to be integrated. I actually was Citizen of the Year of Australia on national television for that in 1990. And so all of this to say, I was the only one going to school. I was, in a wheelchair, and everybody looked at me, and, I'd come home crying, like, why was I born this way? I don't understand. God loves me. Where is he? So that was the childhood. And how could any good come from this? How could I ever find a wife? At age 8, I convinced myself, Jordan, that I'd never get married.
Wow.
Even if I got married, I can't even hold my wife's hand. I convinced myself that I would always be bullied, that I'd never get a job, that I'd always be a dependent, that I'd never be independent, that all these things just surmounted, but by the grace of God and mercy of God, I had the loving home, and I want to start there. So that's the beginnings.
I love that. There is so much I relate
we
to.
could talk.
My sister, so I was, in addition to my scoliosis and cerebral palsy, I went through a bunch of surgeries to correct my curved spine and my hips. And but I also have severe asthma. So I was hospitalized from age like 6 to 18, probably 4 times a year because of the asthma. And half of those times I would be in ICU. I was intubated when I was 18 for 2 weeks. And so there was a lot, like I spent a big chunk of my time in the hospital. And I have 2 younger sisters and an older brother. And my sister, who's 2 years younger than me, I remember as a little kid saying, like, it's not fair Jordan gets to go to the hospital. I want to go to the hospital because she saw that, like, people bring me balloons and toys and all of this stuff. So it is such, in hindsight, whenever you look back, it's such an interesting dynamic. But yeah, having a loving home was key for me as well, because my mom is the type of person that no matter what I could tell her today that I want to change careers and I want to be a firefighter, and she would totally support it. She would send me a list of like places I can start training, or like she would do whatever she could to support that. And because of that, like, just total faith in my abilities, even if no one else has that same faith in my abilities. She that helped me believe in myself a little bit more. And the moment though that I began to, because there were times I knew I walked different from other kids, I knew my back was crooked, I knew all of that, but I didn't feel bad about it as a child. The other kids accepted me in elementary school, and I played with them the same way. Like there wasn't the insecurities yet. And then I went to high school, and it was my first public school. And I was just different enough that it made me like an easy target. I knew
Mhm,
nobody.
mhm.
And I couldn't really find a group to fit in with. I bounced around. I tried different clothes. I wore a wig like a little Afro wig to see if anyone would notice, and no one noticed. So it was like all of these weird tactics to try to be seen and try to find my place. And then one day, I remember these kids invited me to come sit with them and started talking about acting. And they asked, what I do. So I told them I act. And at the time, I had done a couple of little guest spots on like Nickelodeon shows or Disney things. So I told them that, and I was starting to get excited that like, oh, these people are showing interest, they care. And then they said, oh, I didn't know they let cripples on that show. And that was the moment that I was like, oh, this thing that makes me different is bad. This is something I need to be ashamed of. And around that, within that same year, I was starting to have casting directors comment on it as well and say, hey, can you try it again without the limp, or can you tone the limp down, and things like that. And it became this
Wow.
thing where I felt like I had been given this gift and this blessing of like, and this passion for acting. I felt like I was given that for a reason, but then I felt like God also gave me this curse that would prevent me from ever realizing, the potential of that gift. So it was a weird relationship I had with my limp, and I became suicidal as a teenager. I dealt with severe depression, but that was the moment for me, and I want to talk more about the moment that I started to see it as something to be proud of and something to embrace later on in life. But what was did you have a moment for you that you started to view that as a bad thing?
What a compelling story you have.
Oh, thank you.
Have you written a book?
I'm working on it
Oh
actually.
my
So
goodness. Oh my goodness. You got to write a book.
I may reach out for some advice in that
I'm down the
area.
street. You got me.
Yeah.
For me, so your question was, how was my journey on that
Yeah.
in that context? For sure. I hated the idea that that my parents would believe in a God who didn't make sense to me,
Right.
and who was okay at that point to believe that he's still good, even though I've asked for a miracle. You read the Bible and you see these miracles and you ask, why not me? Like, why don't you get, and then you go to school and these bullies who tease you, for me, I looked at these kids and I'm like, they don't deserve their arms. Like, why didn't you give them arms? Like, rip them off and give them to me. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And the whole journey of wondering why was sometimes all I could think of. But I did have a joyous, couple years, like ages 6, 7, 8. It wasn't all depressed, but the dark days came at age 8 to 12.
Okay.
And so for me, my dad, if I knew I'm not going to be a firefighter, right? Like,
Right.
I knew I wasn't going to be a doctor. But my dad said push in mathematics. So my parents, actually, just so you understand my parents, where they came from,
Hmm.
they fled communism regime of Yugoslavia in 1962 and 1969. They met in Australia. They were in refugee camps. They came to Australia with nothing.
Wow.
So then they had a limbless boy, and they told the limbless boy, listen, be thankful for what you have instead of focusing on what you don't have. And God didn't give you arms and legs, but he gave you a brain. Use your brain. You're smart. Don't be lazy. And so they didn't buy me toys. If I wanted something from the store, I would make money vacuuming the floor for $2 a week. And then it would teach me how to save and be thankful for what I had, and even give me a sense of dignity as well, that I
Mhm.
could do something.
Yeah.
And so in that, it taught me a level of gratitude, that if he gave me everything I wanted when I wanted it, I'd never be a person of gratitude, which is to me the secret of all secrets, where we come to God. And it's actually this mindset that despite your circumstances, even when you don't get a miracle, you can be one. He can give me arms and legs. He doesn't have to give me arms and legs. I can pray for arms and legs, but I don't need arms and legs. I can have a pair of shoes in my closet today, which I do just in case he gives me arms and legs. But whatever it is, I just know that I love him and he loves me. Now, that was when I found him, but pre those seasons of trusting in him, I didn't want to talk to him. Um, I became number one at chess. I became number one at math, and that helped me to like have a foundation of confidence. And if I can't run track, if I can't do football, at least I'm smarter than you at math. That was kind of like my coping mechanism, which was cool. But what I realized was people were judging me for how I look, and I'm like, well, what if I judge you for your nose and your hair and your freckles and your shoes and the way you walk? Like, I mean, big deal. Like, big deal. I have no arms and legs. But it was the point where you were sharing, right? You didn't think it was such a big deal until people told you about your limp and maybe that it was a bad thing. That was as soon as I went to school. And I'm like, oh, I am different, but it's not a good thing. And so at age 8, I got angry because there were no answers, and I prayed for a miracle. There was no miracles going on. Faith of a mustard seed can move mountains. And today, my passion, a lot of people are saying these days in churches, well, just give, do good, be good. And basically God can't say no to your prayers because you pray in his will and blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm sorry, but his perfect will for you, number one, is to go home to heaven. And so that's why Christians are going to die. So if you continue to pray, God, I never want to die, I never want to die, I never want to die, guess what? One day you're going to die. Yeah. It's the same thing with cancer. Christians die of cancer.
Yeah.
But we know, though, which it was hard for me to believe. It's like, okay, if you didn't give me this pain, then why don't you take it away? So the first fundamental principle is understanding that disabilities, cancer, sickness, death came from sin. And the sin came from the fall of man. Now we have mosquitoes biting us, we have death, we have cancer, we have disabilities. I wanted to believe, Jordan, that the Bible was fully true. I wanted to believe in heaven, the power of the resurrection. I knew I was a liar if I lied once. I know if I stole once, I'm a thief. I knew that I wasn't perfect for heaven. But I just didn't understand, if he really loves me, where are my arms and legs? So I actually tried to commit suicide at age 10.
Wow.
Convinced myself that he had forgotten me when he, said in the Bible, he has a plan for me. He's like, well, that's not for me. That can't be for me. And so I tried to drown myself with 6 inches of water in the bathtub. And it's very scary trying to attempt suicide. Sucking in water, trying to figure out how much do you swallow before you inhale it, and then you're done. And it was premeditated. For 2 years, I'd been thinking about it. And so the third time I rolled over, though, by the mercy of God, God gave me a picture in my mind. My mom and my dad crying at my grave, wishing they could have done something more. And I realized at that point there is something worse than having a limbless kid. It's a limbless kid who commits suicide and leaving that behind. And so I didn't want to do that. But it was done because it was not just because I loved them, but it was because of their love for me, their persistent love. You're beautiful, you're beautiful, you're beautiful, you're beautiful. I just want you to know, parents, even if your children get annoyed when you tell them, just keep on telling them, you're beautiful, you're beautiful, you're beautiful, because that persistent love is needed in the soul, because we're never going to go through life without resistance.
Yeah.
But if you embrace resistance, that's how you get resilience. No one gets resilience without resistance, and no one's going to go through life without resistance. And in fact, if you're a Christian without resistance, maybe you're actually not standing in the right place. And so when you know that all fundamentally and principally, by the grace of God, I decided to stay. Didn't really talk to him for years. Real quick, how I came to Jesus and got out of depression. I was playing soccer, hurt my foot so bad, couldn't walk for 3 weeks. Was in bed staring at the ceiling, and I realized I have a choice: either to be angry at the fact that I have no limbs for real, or be thankful for my foot. And with my foot I can be mobile and type on a smartphone and all these things, and it was everything to me, my mobility. And so I started to have the attitude of gratitude. At age 15, read John chapter 9, a man was born blind. No one knew why that man was born blind. And they asked, was it because of his sin or was it because of his parents' sin? I want to unpackage that for a second.
Yeah.
So people think that reincarnation is, a new thingish. No, it's not. So when they asked Jesus, was it because of his sin?
Mm-hmm.
Well, of course, he's not going to sin in the womb in his previous life. And when I was 13, someone said, I know why you were born this way. It was done so that it was done because of reincarnation. And I'm like, what's reincarnation? She told me that I was a bad boy in my previous life, and now I'm coming back limbless because of my previous punishment, basically, for my previous life. I'm like, that is nuts. That is crazy. The other question they had to them was, is it because of the parent's sin? So meaning a punishment for their sin that now they are given by God as a judgment, a child with no sight. No, we know that Romans 6:23 says the wages of sin is death. So if he's punishing us for our sin, we would be dead. So Jesus said neither. It was done so that the works of God would be revealed through him.
Yeah.
And that's when Jesus spits on the dirt, puts mud on the man's face, and the blind man, what changed me, Jordan, was not another miracle. What changed me was the process of this, where Jesus is giving the blind man a facial, and the blind man doesn't say anything, doesn't stop him, doesn't question anything. And here we are. What's your plan, God? Tell me what your plan is. Then I'll tell you if I trust you.
Yeah.
Wait, what's going on? He didn't even say that. He stood there, be still and know that I am God. And he gave this man clay or mud, whatever, dirt with his saliva on his face. And after he was done, he saw. And what was amazing is I realized God has a plan for a blind man. Okay, then God has a plan for me. Who am I to judge his plan? And I realized, more than arms and legs, do I really, really need arms and legs? No, I look at people with arms and legs and they're weeping and they're depressed. And I'm like, but you have arms and legs. And we all know arms and legs doesn't make a difference.
Yeah. It's not all it's cracked up to
It's
be.
not,
Yeah.
it's kind of, it's going to give you arthritis later on anyway. That's what I found out. But, and then I realized what I really needed was my soul to be saved and restored, and needing his peace and knowing my purpose and having that faith to know that his ways and thoughts are higher than mine. If he chooses to give me arms and legs, it doesn't change how good he is. He is God. If he chooses not to give me arms and legs, it doesn't change anything about God. He is God and he is good. If he can use me, and that's when I gave my life at 15 years old, said, Jesus, if you don't give me arms and legs, can I just ask then, use then my pain? Don't waste this.
Yeah.
Just use it. And I'm all in. And I gave my life to Jesus. God, if you give me arms and legs, I'll trust you. If you don't give me arms and legs, I trust you. Now, you have a scoliosis. I've had a scoliosis. I was also born with a rare degenerative disease of my spinal column.
Okay.
At age 19, it was 2002, I had 3 holes in my spine. It's called a syrinx. You have to be born with it.
Wow.
And they gave me a prognosis by age 35, I'm going to have no back. Now, at age 19, I'd already seen my first miracle as we prayed for someone with a crooked back. I mean, she was 65 degrees. Her legs were uneven. In South Africa, we laid hands on her. Her legs became straight. Her back became straight. And she fell to the floor weeping out of joy. And I'm like, oh my gosh, God is in the house. I'm ready for my miracle. And he didn't give me a miracle. And it was like so ironic that he uses a man without arms and legs to then see other miracles happen.
Sure.
And it was so surreal. And then we prayed in South Africa, and I actually saw probably 6, 7 miracles in a row. Now even in my own back, Jordan, with doctors from Southern California, they've actually seen over 14 years my 3 holes in my spine become 2, become 1, become none.
Whoa.
Medically unexplainable. And now I've seen the spiritual realm. I've seen demons walking through my hotel room, not in Africa, in California. I've seen the spiritual realm. I've seen exorcisms. I know God is real. So do I know that God can do miracles? Absolutely. Was it weird going into Macy's and buying my own pair of shoes? Absolutely. Do I believe that God can do it right now? Absolutely. But do I know that when you don't get a miracle now that you can still be one? Absolutely.
Yeah.
the last story, and then I'll let you come back. Sorry, I just want to
No,
share
no,
all
I'm
that in a
loving
row.
this. Yeah, yeah.
But it was amazing at age 24 when I was speaking in California. And there was a little boy with no arms and no legs, and he was so cute. He also had a little left foot, just like me. I was like, oh my gosh. Um, and so I interrupted the sermon, and I said, "Can you bring him up on stage?" And I'm looking down at him, his 19-month-old Daniel Martinez. Now he wants to be a speaker and an author, and blah blah blah. And it was amazing. Imagine this is, um, yeah, long time ago. I was 24 years old, 16 years ago. Okay.
Yeah.
Up on the table with me in front of the whole congregation, is looking at me, and I'm looking down in here, and I put my little foot on his foot, and he smiles, and everyone cries, and his mother comes up and says, "Thank you for being our miracle." My heart, the only thing that could come to my mind was, "Thank you, Lord." I couldn't plan this. If I was born without limbs, and God said no to my begging, my arms and legs at age 8, so I could help this child know that it's going to be okay. And then if now he knows that if God has a plan for Uncle Nick, then God has a plan for little Daniel. Yeah, I wished, I'm sure you would wish as well. Like, I wish someone came to our schools and told every bully to shut their freaking mouth.
Yeah.
Just like be quiet,
Yeah.
I never had a limbless speaker come to my school
Mhm.
to tell him that. But I went to his school and I told him that in a loving way, in a compelling way,
Yeah.
and in a winsome way that actually bullying completely stopped across the school.
Wow.
He just graduated high school, is getting his business management degree. He wants to become a speaker and an author and blah, blah, blah. And so I might give him a couple pointers, of course, right? And so the amazing thing here is like, I know, Jordan, who you are because of what God's done in you and how much you love him and trust him, wherein you got a wife, you got 3 kids, you're happy, you got this show, you go and acting, but it's the bottom line of not about our success.
Mhm.
It's about being where God wants us to be. And whether that means we're a bedridden person who can't walk, can't talk, it was a person who actually couldn't walk, couldn't talk, who God used to convince me at age 19 to go out into all the world and preach the gospel. Because that man who couldn't walk, couldn't talk because of Lou Gehrig's disease, Phil Toth, in San Diego, California, when I met him, he smiled. And I knew before he was completely bedridden at age 25 that he actually started a website to encourage other bedridden people, thinking this guy can't walk, can't talk, and he can reach hundreds of people. I can walk and I can talk.
Yeah.
So here we are today.
Okay. Thank
Sorry,
you for
it's a
sharing
lot. We
all of
could do
that.
so
No,
much.
I love it.
Good.
I'm processing it all. You mentioning Lou Gehrig's disease, the person who, in addition to my mom, the person who, for me, was one of my biggest influences and inspirations was my grandfather, who it wasn't Lou Gehrig. It was basically a form of Lou Gehrig's disease
Sure.
called olivopontocerebellar atrophy. And it's a mouthful, but he had it. He was the head of a hospital in Arlington, Texas, for years. He was a great doctor, the most patient, loving, compassionate, kind, quiet man I've ever known. Like, he just listened and observed, and we'd watch the Dallas Cowboys games together and old movies together. And you could just see him sitting there watching the grandkids and great grandkids playing, and just how much joy that brought him. But he got this disease, and his life expectancy when he was diagnosed was about 5 years. And he made it 20 years with the disease, because every day he'd get up and ride his exercise bike and get dressed and do all of these things, even if it took him 3 hours to get his pants and shoes and socks on,
Wow.
because he knew as soon as he stopped that then it would all go downhill. So he did everything as long as he possibly could, and he passed away. This will be 4 years ago this year. But there wasn't a day that I ever saw him complain or show any bitterness or resentment. He was just always so grateful for everything, and such a rock in our family, but such a role model for me, because the times that I would feel bad about myself, or beat myself up over something or feel insecure, I always would think of him and how he, lived his life. So it's interesting that was someone who gave you
Wow.
inspiration. It's
Wow.
a similar type of
Wow.
thing. Even the last 2 years of his life, couldn't eat. He had a feeding tube. He couldn't speak really because his speech was so slurred. So he couldn't communicate. He couldn't eat. He couldn't really move. He was in his chair or in bed. And he was still just as happy as he was when he was totally able-bodied. And yeah, it was such an inspiration. But
Wow.
yeah, as far as one of the big things that's helped me as well, since we have embraced my condition and made it part of my character on The Chosen, it's the children that have reached out, and the parents of children, and just other people in general, whether they have a disability or not. I've had kids reach out that have severe acne that felt seen in that little James and Jesus moment, that have asked God, like, why won't you heal my acne? Like, they have their insecurity is just as real as either of
Yeah.
ours. And
Yeah.
body image issues,
Yeah.
learning disabilities, like
Yeah.
any number of things.
Yeah.
And it's just been, now I'm at a point, and I want to ask you this question too. When Dallas asked me if I would be comfortable using my disability in the character, I said yes, but I was also terrified because I knew I would have to be more vulnerable as an actor than I had ever been before.
Wow. How old were you at that point?
That was, let's see,
Ish.
I think it was 30,
Amazing.
29, 30,
So
something
you're
like
already
that.
married. You're already a father.
Yeah. And
This is real, man.
yeah, and it was like becoming a father definitely changed my perspective,
Sure.
because I remember loving my children so, like, more than I can ever even explain. And they love me too and accept me. And I remember thinking, I just had this thought one day that, like, if they can accept me as I am, they wouldn't want me to walk any different. They love the way I walk.
100%.
I'm their dad. So if they can accept me like this, why can't I accept myself? If any of them walked like I do, I would love and accept them without any issue.
Yeah.
Like I would think they're just as beautiful as they are now. And so that helped me be a little kinder to myself. But I still hated walking past a reflective surface. I still hated seeing myself walk on camera. That was at the forefront of my mind in every audition, every role that I got was don't limp, don't limp, don't limp, rather than just playing the character. And so Dallas doing that, it was terrifying, but it gave me this freedom that I didn't really anticipate, which was, now I just get to act. I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to think about whether or not I'm limping. And that's carried over into other roles. I just did 1883 and worked on that for 5 or 6 months. My character didn't specifically have a disability, but I wasn't worried about whether or not I was limping. I was just playing the character,
Yeah.
and it was liberating. But Dallas asked me when he was when he decided to make it part of the character, he said, if God could heal you right now, just out of curiosity, he was like, if God could heal you right now, would you want to be healed? And I told him no, but I really would. Like in that moment, I was like, if I was being honest, I would have said yes, I would want to be healed. But now, just a couple years later, going through all of this, getting to act out this scene where I'm literally, not quite yelling, but I'm angry at Jesus for not healing me. That was a really surreal experience as well. But getting to act all of that out and having him tell me that, you will be healed one day. It's a matter of time. And all of the things that he says in the scene, it was like running a marathon. By the end of the day, I was just totally drained in the best way. And then the response after of all of these people, I've developed really strong connections and relationships with a lot of the fans that have reached out that have disabilities or children that are bullied. And now, for the first time in my life, I genuinely, if I had the choice, I don't think I would want to be healed, because I'm really enjoying being able to, or like, using this now for good. And like you said, you don't waste this pain, like, use it.
Right.
And I feel totally, there are still moments of insecurity, of course, but I feel totally at peace with who I am and with the body that I've been given, and proud of it. And I maybe my asthma. If God, if you want to heal my asthma, that'd be.
In
I'll take that one.
Jesus' name, we pray
Um,
for that asthma to
but
go.
the
Amen.
but as far as the limp, it's something that uh, I think that's the thing I want to ask. Like, one, if you had the option right now to be healed, would you? And then I want to dive into a little bit of the faith healing and how some people's opinion that everyone will be healed if they ask or have enough faith. I want to talk about that because I've come across some fans and people that have reached out and pushed back against that scene a bit. So I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on how to.
I want to start there.
Yeah.
'cause
Okay.
that
Yeah.
just
Let's start there.
angers me there.
Yeah.
There are churches who, first of all, they have no education whatsoever in how to even embrace a family affected with a disability. And the number one ministry for that is johnnyandfriends.org. Johnny Erickson Tata,
Yeah.
17, 19 years old, cracks her neck. She's quadriplegic, amazing woman of God, ambassador for Jesus, legend, still here with us, and a dear friend of mine. And she helped us in the early days. So it's first of all uneducated awareness. There's just none. And then you have the prosperity gospel where these Gen Zers who are seeing gold dust in the room are told to go and evangelize and just go out and heal people, going out to the market streets and laying their hands on cerebral palsy, wheelchair-bound teenagers, freaking people out. It's those Gen Z people who are told that, who are also the ones who are praying for a car instead of getting a job.
Yeah.
Okay? Go get a job. You want a car? No. God gives you arms and legs. Go get a job and go save up money. You want to be generous? Good. Go make money and buy someone else a car. It's this understanding, unfortunately, of this culture of moving in the spirit, moving in the spirit, moving in the spirit. I'm going to dance on my bills instead of getting a job and paying off my credit cards. It's so saddening. So I'm talking about the extreme of extremes right there. And that's the same extreme of televangelists who, they own 4 planes and they got one butt.
Yeah.
And, 25,000 people today die of starvation. That's the extreme. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, in that setting, okay, now let's bring back the dial a little bit. Close to the middle ground are the people who say, well, you just need to have more faith. Well, okay, you don't know how much faith I have, but the Bible says that I need to have faith of a mustard seed to move mountains, okay? And God even healed people based on your faith, not theirs, in the shadow, without anyone. The apostles would walk by people and without talking to them, without them even understanding what faith is, miracles happen. So God moves beyond even our faith too, arguably, if you want to put it that way, if we want to have a scientific, doctrinal discussion here. Now, I know we don't want to have that, but I've had these discussions. So I want people to understand this. It's not based on your faith. God knows the desires of your heart. It's also nothing wrong with you asking God to still heal your child of cerebral palsy.
Right.
You can love your child with all your heart and still pray that God still gives that child a less of a burden of life, whether it's a mental handicap, whether it's cancer, whether it's anything, right? And all these things. And there's nothing wrong with praying. I want people to know, don't feel guilty for hoping one day, okay? And you can still have contentment and be thankful and gratitude for every day and still feel deep down, it would be nice.
Yeah.
Right? So I want parents to understand that. And you having, no arms and no legs, Nick, do you still want arms and legs? Well, first of all, I know that it's not dependent on how much money I give or how obedient I am to the Lord or some sin in my life. There are some people who are saying, oh, you got the flu because of your sin. Shut up.
Yeah.
You have the flu because, you're not, there's something wrong. What are you doing? Where's the sin? Confess. I'm like, shut up, right?
Yeah.
All these things. So even John Erickson taught us, she said, you feel to pray for me? Go for it. I'm not going to stop you. Am I happy today? Yeah. Would she love to get out of a wheelchair?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So it's that freedom of knowing, though, that the number one joy is abiding in him and he abiding in us. So I think I covered that.
Yeah.
All right. Now for me, today, Jordan, you asked me, okay? Today, like I'm looking at the clock, but I don't know whenever this is going to be. Let's say this morning. Doesn't matter when this is uploaded.
Sure.
Today, in the context of this question, I'm 40. I got a wife, 4 kids. I'm fully content. I've never been so happy. I went through hell the last 3 years, and it had nothing to do with my arms and legs. I mean,
yeah,
we've had grenades at our home, FBI bomb squad. We've had spying drones kicked out of the bank. I mean, Jordan, there's so much hell that we went through in the last 3 years, okay? I went through counseling in February 21. Needed 10 hours of counseling. And it was a rough 3 years. We don't talk about a lot all the time about it, but I share that much with you today.
Yeah.
But in the context of traveling 78 countries so far, yeah, 2,500 flights, 3,500 speeches. I've been on television to China.
Yeah.
To 1 billion people. Do you know where I'm going on Saturday? I'm going to India. You want to know what they're doing in India? I found out for 10 years I've been a mandatory study in the nation of India for every single public school student as an inspiration in a national country that has a religion called Hinduism. Now, Hindu means that you and me are outcasts. Our mothers should have been divorced and ostracized from community, and we are nothing. We shouldn't even be looked at. We should never reproduce. God forbid we reproduce.
Yeah.
That's Hinduism, okay? At its purest form. 330 million gods. A lot of gods to please and appease. So,
wow.
Very interesting. Now, I'm a mandatory textbook study. Amazing. Now, we're actually going to do a live stream into every single school across 2 states, live stream, and national television once again. So, I've been there 5 times. To now be in 78 countries, preaching the gospel to 9.8 million people in the countries that I could preach the gospel in, and seeing 1.1 million give their life to Jesus Christ. Now, when I was a kid begging God for arms and legs, I actually said, God, doesn't it make sense and wouldn't it be cool? If you gave me arms and legs, I'd go on Oprah Winfrey Show and meet presidents. Well, I was on Oprah without arms and legs. And I've met 24 presidents and prime ministers. And the last one was Benjamin Netanyahu behind closed doors for an hour and a half. And now he wants me to go and speak motivationally to every single school in the country and everyone in the military defense. We know presidents. I text presidents, okay? This is amazing. We're talking about resetting all of sub-Saharan Africa. We're talking about preaching the gospel to 8 billion people through lifewithoutlimbs.org. I mean, we bought the domain 8billionsouls.com. I'm now the chief of Gen Z chairman for 22 denominations on their programming of discipleship and evangelism. We're completely resetting some churches who actually completely want to reset. So,
wow.
If 2 billion people, which is a quarter of the world, 1 in 4 people know who I am without arms and legs. So if you ask me today, would it be great to have arms and legs? Would I want it? 100%. Because it wouldn't ever be a question in my mind, did I reach enough people without arms and legs? Because a quarter of the world, 1 in 4 already have known me without arms and legs.
Right.
So I kind of have an advantage over that. Now, ask me 3 years ago, I don't know.
Yeah.
Now, I'm feeling like I have to start praying for it. This is weird, dude.
Yeah.
I'm actually starting to pray for arms and legs.
Wow.
I'm actually starting to pray for arms and legs regularly.
Fascinating.
It is fascinating.
Yeah.
It's very fascinating. I mean,
yeah.
And I've never said that on camera.
Right.
Like I'm regularly now praying for arms and legs.
But I'm sure it feels so different.
It's different
from the prayer as that 8-year-old or 10-year-old.
It's
doing
completely like a different lifetime.
Yeah.
And it's not that I'm like, and it's funny because you can relate to this. You never get over the fact of having a limp. You never get over the fact to having no arms and legs. And it sucks when your wheelchair breaks down. And people don't understand. Like, today I was a little angry because it's really hard to find the right Q-tips for my ears. I'm like, I've gone through 30 different Q-tip brands trying to get another human being who's trying to just clean your ears without poking your
Yeah.
eardrum. Just these little things that people don't understand. One of my most difficult things today was cleaning my ears.
Wow.
But people don't understand. And
Yeah.
that's been like, and it's a highlight every single time I clean my ears
Yeah.
until we find the right Q-tip. I mean, it's like that. It's that. Like, people don't understand, though, the long suffering of the position. I want people to understand this. Ready? Some of the people who are listening to this are actually one of the greatest prayer warriors in the world. And those are the people who actually fix their eyes on Jesus Christ. And he allows you to actually remain sometimes in the long suffering, to abide in him and depend on him just like never before. So that you and your prayer life is in him and you actually pray. You pray. You actually probably pray more than your pastor.
Mhm.
Okay? And so we must understand that there is prayer warrior intercession, there's encouragement, and there's this incredible thing called technology. I actually believe, Jordan, I actually believe this. I believe that disabled, homebound people, according to the Luke 14 mandate, we're actually about to become the most spotlight. This is the first time I'm ever saying this publicly, so I'm just trying to process exactly how I'm saying this before it comes out of my mouth. I see an army of 1 million people with disabilities to start their podcasts or ministries or Zoom calls to encourage, and I see armies being raised up. And people who feel like there is no purpose will come to their home through the camera.
Mhm.
And what Jordan has been doing, maybe you're supposed to also start doing. Be encouraged by this. It's not Nick or Jordan, it's God. And whatever God did through Nick and Jordan is in him, through him, for him. Not that we were smarter than you. And so it's also the gift of long suffering, the long suffering state of being in need continually.
Mhm.
I want to say what Johnny Erickson Tada said. She said, Jordan, God ruthlessly perfects those who he royally elects.
Wow.
And there are some people who go to church every single Sunday, and you know, they're hoping for a smooth week.
Right.
Oh my gosh. Are we here to sip a pina colada? Have you not heard about the Great Commission? Have you not heard that there are 70 million people with human trafficking? Have you not heard? Have you not heard 25,000 people died today? You know, like, hello, where are we? It's amazing. People don't understand the opportunity of having someone as a cerebral palsy church member person they can smile and probably even evangelize better than your pastor or your youth pastor. And you want to know what's amazing? When people see a limp or a limbless man or someone with cerebral palsy, guess what happens? Their smile is noticed. Their smile is noticed.
Yeah.
More than anybody. And that's your story. You see, your story ain't done yet. And so, champions for the brokenhearted with life without limbs, we understand that it's more than just me and my story. We talk about the unborn, we talk about the human traffic, we talk about people with disabilities, and that's our March theme. Each month we have a theme, and I would love to interview you on that
I
show.
love that. Yeah.
That would be amazing. I think it's now. I think it's now that we understand that it's beyond disabilities. It's all about broken hearts and coming back to our misstep in theology
Mhm.
that we're actually not getting. Where when you come to God, He does the greatest miracle of all. He saves you and He fills you with His Spirit. But then you walk with Him and you talk with Him and you surrender to Him. And you see the blessings of God in that. In His grace is sufficient. Apostle Paul asked God
Yeah.
3 times, please take this from my side. Take this thorn. God said, no.
Yeah.
My grace is sufficient for you. My strength is made perfect in your weakness.
You've been at this for a lot longer than me in terms of being in the public eye and being a spokesperson for a certain community and for uh, offering hope and encouragement to people. And now through The Chosen and through this character in the podcast, I'm blessed enough to be beginning that. I've started doing some more speaking engagements.
Awesome.
And I've been traveling around doing that, and it's been a learning process of trying to figure out all of the logistics of it and figuring out the structure and stuff that I want to work with. But one thing that I've come across that maybe you'll have some advice is the people who do, like you touched on the Christians who say you just need to pray harder. And there are times where I need to catch myself, or I've had to catch myself a few times among the thousands of positive comments of other people with disabilities that are reaching out and saying, I felt like Jesus was talking to me in that scene, and all of these amazing messages and emails that I've been getting. There's every now and then the one that says that scene was, blasphemous. That scene was, God does want to heal you. God never would have not healed someone that asked. Like all of these things. And one woman on Facebook, I was tagged on a video, and she has a page with this ministry that she does, and in the video it was her just saying how disappointed she was in The Chosen for doing that scene, for portraying little James in this way. And
Everyone's got an opinion.
I posted a long response to it, and
Sure.
as compassionately and as gentle as I could, and just explained, because she kept referring to little James as sick or broken. So I responded and was like, "Hey, little James here. I just wanted to say, I don't view myself as sick or broken, or even in need of the type of healing that you're talking about." And I just wrote this long thing and talked about all of the Christians, all of the Christians with disabilities out there that are never healed, all of the Christians, like we talked about, with cancer, that aren't healed. And the idea, according to her, that they weren't healed because they didn't have enough faith, or they didn't ask enough, or they didn't pray hard enough. And to me, I've never agreed with that or believed in that. And then she went on Facebook Live, I noticed, responding to my response. So I joined her Facebook Live, and we just had a little conversation and hashed it out. I quickly realized I wasn't going to get anywhere.
Yeah, no.
So that's kind of the lesson I learned from that, was like,
give me her. Let's go.
There we go. Yeah,
let's go.
I mentioned you and Johnny.
No, I'd love to. Like, seriously. But you know what? Then maybe people don't even know who she is.
Right.
I'd rather have her sit with somebody who actually everyone knows.
Yeah.
And that's been in my brain.
Yeah.
I won't take her. I love you. God bless you.
Sure.
It's not about taking someone on, but it's about having the conversation that actually needs to be said. And I'm not going to mention who she was.
Sure.
This person that I'm about to tell you. I went to this woman, very prominent daddy, very prominent, very respected worldwide. And I said, when do we correct the church? She said, we don't. And I totally disagree. We have misstepped. And you go talk to anyone in South America and anyone in Africa and ask them, how did the prosperity gospel wave affect your continents? Where did it come from? Oh, America. That is reality. I'm sorry. But when it comes to prosperity gospel, why would God ever deny your healing? I would love to have that debate with people. We're actually coming to a stage where I'm actually going to do a TV talk show. Yeah. And it's going to be unlike nothing, like anything else. And I'm just done. I'm 40. I've seen it. I hate Instagram, Facebook. And I'm not a Christian just to complain about things. You ask God for the solution
Mhm.
and you figure it out. And by the grace of God, there is technology and people who are all thinking the same way, where there are alternative ways to really continue to emanate without being bullied and blockwalled and algorithmed of Instagram and Facebook to be canceled. We've been canceled. We know what that feels like. And so this is, to me, such an important show, a podcast that emanates truth. So thank you, because outside of Johnny Erickson Tada, there aren't a lot of other people. I mean, there are some out there for sure. And there are some wonderful speakers out there. And books.
Mhm.
Jen Bricker is amazing too. You gotta talk to her one day.
Yeah.
She's a friend of mine. But I just feel this is such a beautiful moment for me, just to meet you and speak this way to the audience that you had. Jordan, I don't ever think I've ever had an audience like this, where you can just outright share this stuff in such a comfortable way and just having the conversation, but also not shying away from the most difficult questions. So I love you, man.
I love you
I'm
too.
sorry if I said too
No.
much, but I'm not. But
No.
this is really a passion of mine,
Yeah.
and I want people to know, like, we will do what we're supposed to do. And I'm not afraid of saying what you're doing that actually may be needing a different approach and perspective. And I'm always
Yeah.
open to having a healthy debate.
Yeah.
Always. That's the only way to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, have the conversation. Let's have a conversation about how you can actually have a conversation about the broken foster care and adoption, about the human trafficked, about the abuse. Do you know that 1 in 3 girls in America have been sexually abused by age 17? 1 out of 5 boys by age 17 sexually abused in America.
Yeah.
We're the #1 leading human trafficking nation in the world right now. We tripled the quadruple in 24 months. Human trafficking in Texas, we've tripled the quadruple.
Wow.
Of the annual data just came in.
Insane.
This is insane. It's insane. And so you can't talk about God and love without talking about the value of life, the miraculous, and the church actually waking up, actually getting off the ventilator, because some don't even know they're on.
You mentioning like having some humility and I think when it comes to, the prosperity gospel, a lot of the people who,
I'm not saying that people haven't been saved from
Sure, yeah.
Sorry.
No, but a lot of the people that are of the mindset that, you got to pray harder, you're gonna get what you're asking for.
Yeah.
You just have to do this.
Yeah.
They're typically in positions of privilege. They're typically able-bodied. They aren't in need in the same way that some other people might be.
Yeah.
And I think it is so important and I try to do this on the podcast as well, have people that have different struggles, different, I had Rami Youssef, who's a Muslim comedian who has a TV show on Hulu that's a hilarious show. He talked a lot about being a Muslim teenager in New York right after 9/11 and what he experienced with that. And,
can't imagine.
I had a father on who lost his daughter in a mass shooting and when she was 14 years old at Parkland in Florida. I think it's so important to have conversations and to just listen to other people as a human being.
Yes.
And to love them, to have compassion for them, even if you still come out of the conversation disagreeing, you at least can empathize with them and understand how they came to their conclusion, how they got to where they are. And I think that the church in general, that's been something I've had an issue with in America in particular. I think that we have a bit of an ego in America and the American church at times where there's not always that humility and willingness to look in the mirror and to ask the tough questions and to say, hey, what are we doing wrong? What can we do to lead with more compassion and empathy, and I think that there is a lot of room to grow in all of us and within the church, and it's easy to become stagnant, and that's one of the reasons I started this podcast, was to grow as a person and to hear people and to share, you know, my story, and in hopes that it can help others, maybe do the same. So
I love it. And I'm sorry if I came off strong, but I'm just more
I love
angry
it.
at the churches, more
Yeah,
than anything. Only because, here's some music to face. 100,000 churches with $490 billion worth of debt for buildings that was mostly emptied. And we can't take 500,000 kids off the foster care system. I mean, seriously, dude.
yeah,
So forgive the Christians for being asleep. And if this is a wake up moment, welcome. I love you. Let's go. Let's get learning and let's move. Um, yes, and may we reach out to be the hands and feet and love people and preach the gospel with or without words.
yeah. Amen. Now, I want to, before we wrap it up, I want to ask you what I end all of my podcasts with, and I gave you I gave you a little heads up before we started. So,
Sure.
I always end by asking, what is the thing that you love most about yourself?
Oh gosh. Well, let me reframe the question. What am I most thankful for me in my life first, if I may preface
Sure.
it? Any good that you see in me, honestly, with no false humility, it's in him, for him, through him. Even the breath that I have is his. Yeah, I'm glad I know the truth, and that's truly set me free from all the fear and anything that the world could ever give me or take away from me or tell me. I know the truth, um, and I'm glad. What do I like about myself? Coming to your question, I love the fact that it was groomed by my parents, that when people come up to me and they're a little awkward,
Yeah.
they said, look, well, they just don't know what to do. Do they shake your hand? Do they talk to you? Do they look at you? Do we ask you for help? All these things. I mean, you and I could have 10 podcasts together actually on
Yeah.
all this and
Do a
break
whole
it down. Like
series.
just that, yeah, no, I'm actually tempted to think more about that with you. And figure what that looks like,
Yeah.
because so many people, like a practical level, like it's even people who actually have a heart for people with disabilities, like, hey, tell me, or a caregiver, like, because I've had caregivers, and there's people that ask, like, hey, I'm helping someone with something. Do I do this? Do I not do this? When do I lean
Yeah.
in? When do I go? Like, and then anyway, so what I like though about what my parents basically taught me was just relax. Like, don't be offended if someone asks you, do you want help? Do you need help? Just
Right.
freaking relax. They've never seen anyone like you. The kids are pointing at me. They've never seen anyone like you.
Yeah.
But what I love most was they taught me just to be myself and talk
Hmm.
and just hi. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll do that. And I was hi. And they said hi back. And I'm like, oh, I can have a conversation, right?
Yeah.
And in that conversation, then I took it a little bit more and started saying jokes. Like if it's a cold morning, hey, it's cold, can't feel my hands. And then, the ice breaks, and then they're actually conversing with me on an eye level,
Yeah.
Uh, and so I think the humor part has obviously really helped with all the beginning years of me learning the ropes of 3,500 speeches. Humor is always there,
Yeah.
and I think humor is a wonderful thing. It's like music, it's like movies that really connect and open the heart in a way that brings down the barriers. And so
Yeah.
the preconceived ideas of what is he here now is going to make me feel sorry for him, blah blah blah. Oh my god, he can even make fun of himself.
Right.
This guy's cool. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
It's like addressing the elephant in the room,
There you
because
go.
people don't know how
They
to
don't know.
react to, yeah, it's something too that I'm really aggressive in my pursuit for of working with filmmakers that I admire, or finding other acting projects, and now I lead with my limp. I like when I'm sending emails to producers or casting directors, I always put in a little note. I mention, like, I have a limp, I have cerebral palsy and scoliosis. I tell them a bit of my story, send them my footage, and then I always end the emails by saying, I know this is a little unorthodox, but I'm just trying to do anything I can to give myself a leg up, pun intended. And it's something that instead of worrying about it and viewing it as a bad thing, I'm like, no, I'm own it. It's the hand that we've been dealt. So yeah, I love that. I love that approach.
Kids come up and they ask what happened. I just say cigarettes.
Don't smoke.
Don't smoke. You just use an anti-smoking campaign.
Yeah, that's great.
No, it's all
I
good.
love that.
You were such a joy to get to know today.
You too.
Thank you so.
This was
I can't
such
wait
a
to
blessing.
meet your wife and your family.
Yeah, I know. We'll have to get together. Yeah.